I'm Karen Ford, and I'm the host of the new show, Sci-Fi Zone, where we will be discussing everything and anything related to sci-fi, fantasy, video gaming, and anything else that's geeky in Newfoundland, Labrador. And with me today, I have Mr. Paul Dooley. And next to me is Fleming Hansen. And of course, the lovely Darren Han. And with me today, we also have Shannon Lush, and he will be discussing everything about Doctor Who in Newfoundland Labrador. So come back and join us after these messages from our sponsor. Welcome back. And Shannon, I was just wondering about with Doctor Who. How did you get started with Doctor Who?
Well, I got started maybe about 1989, 1990 roughly. There was a sizable local group of people here called the as yet unnamed Doctor Who Fan Club of Newfoundland. It's a very long name. They never actually did adapt an actual name. That was about maybe 40 to 50 people who were local fans in the St. John's and metro area. And when I got involved, I was involved through a friend of mine who was a member. By the time I got involved, they had already produced a couple of fan videos. In fact, they were working on their second fan video that I got involved in. They had a newsletter called The Historian, which went throughout Newfoundland and was picked up by a lot of other fan clubs throughout Canada. And I just became very immersed in that world because it's a very interesting series, and it's been on the go for a long time. So that's kind of really how I got involved. I kind of went overboard like I always do. And I've been involved ever since.
Is there anybody else involved, like locally? Is there any fan clubs going on there now, or any more interest?
There's not any, to the best of my knowledge. I mean, when I was involved with it, there was an awful lot of people who were in their 20s, early 30s, who were, unfortunately, life intruded, so they had to go elsewhere, and some got work on the mainland, some just lost interest. There's no official group anymore, but I try to keep it alive, I guess. I do a podcast called The Historian, which is named after the fanzine, as I mentioned. And there is a sizable contingent of local fans now because the series has been resurrected as of 2005. So more and more people are coming on board with Doctor Who now. There probably will be at some point an officially organized group again, but there's still the vestiges of the old group that still sort of kick around, like myself.
How do you find, like, you say there was a fan club one time, but now where there's other media like Facebook and the internet, you find clubs are not so localized now, but instead of being like a club where you'd meet every Sunday, now you've got like a Facebook group where people can chat and meet and talk.
Very much so, yeah. It's unfortunately, it's almost dehumanizing almost, because there used to be sort of a very much a kitchen party atmosphere when you went to the local conventions, excuse me, the local groups. We got together usually every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday because that's our weekend. You know, we would do gaming on Friday, and we would watch maybe an episode, if anybody had any episodes on the Saturday, and then Sunday was more gaming, just getting together, putting together the actual magazine that went out, the newsletter. You're right, yeah, there's an awful lot of dehumanizing element, really, to Facebook, because, I mean, instead of people actually getting together, such as we are now, you've got people who just prefer to contact each other through Facebook and just have conversations online. It's too bad. I mean, that's why I enjoy science fiction convention, because it's a chance for everybody to get together, meet, interact, maybe have a potluck, something like that. It was a lot of fun years ago, definitely.
So now, years before, you'd go to the club, you'd meet somebody, you'd sort of hang out with them for a day, and know them for years. And now the only way you can talk to something, the way the group sort of works now is that you meet them online. You may never ever get physically.
That's right.
Meet them in
You
person.
will interact in person. That's exactly right. Well, I mean, all of the people, with very rare exception, all of the people that I met when I joined, and I joined a few years into the, I guess, heyday of the local fan groups. All the people I met, I'm still friends with. I still interact with. Some of them, as I said before, have moved on to overseas, or they have jobs in the mainland. And even so, there's still that bond that began by having a mutual interest in Doctor Who, and it just blossomed from there. I certainly am friends with a lot of the people that were involved in that channel.
Now, you mentioned gaming. Is that gaming like for Doctor Who?
There is Doctor Who games. Years ago, there was actually a card game. Long before there was Magic cards, things like that. There was a Doctor Who card game. Actually, the BBC, who owned the rights to Doctor Who, just created last year a multiplayer, mass multiplayer online MMO game that's you can just sort of, I presume you have to pay, I guess, the same way you would if it was World of Warcraft or something. And you go and you become the Doctor, and you're going around immersed in that world of what we call the Whoniverse, I guess. Yeah.
So what do you think of the new Doctor that they have on?
The current Doctor?
Yeah.
Personally, how do I feel about him? It's kind of a touchy subject. I'm not a tremendous fan of Matt Smith. His name is. He's the 11th person to play the role. I'm not a tremendous fan of him. But that being said, the nature of the show is so cyclical that in a couple of years they'll recast that with somebody else, and maybe I'll like the next person. I like the previous person, David Tennant, for example. So, and every Doctor Who is such a show that you have so many different actors, and each individual actor has a production crew behind him with a new producer, a new script editor, new ideas, fresh ideas. So there's different eras of the show that people can enjoy. I mean, right back from 1963 to the present. So I mean, I don't personally like Matt Smith. Anybody who listens to my podcast knows that. But that being said, I mean, I'm just counting down the days to the next Doctor, I guess.
Yeah. Unfortunately, he got cast again for to do another season.
Yes, yeah, he signed up until, well, depending on who you ask, he signed up anywhere from the next season to the season following that. But there's preliminary plans in the works for a Doctor Who big budget television movie, or excuse me, an actual feature film. So whether or not he actually is the Doctor for that remains to be seen.
Still be cool to see that.
I think it would be, sure. Yeah.
How do you feel about the story progression in the new series compared to the old ones?
As a devoted Whovian, let me tell you, it's hard to take my toy, you know what I mean, like something that I'm into, and it was a cult series that not a lot of people were into, and watch as it grows so that the masses can watch it now. It's definitely more accessible now as it was before. There's a few in-jokes, but they're subtly put in so that anybody who's watching it, such as yourself, who may not be, who may not have followed it as devotedly as I have, can certainly pick up on that. Sometimes they go overboard. Sometimes it's almost a Superman, because the Doctor seems to save the universe from, he fixes time itself and all creation every episode, and I think that's a bit much. But they're resurrecting the idea of the historicals. They're having the Doctor interact with people in the past, which is nice. There's been a lot of good episodes that have involved like World War II and just interesting time periods, I guess you could say. Me personally, again, I don't really like Matt Smith, but there has been some interesting stories. They'll be more into what we would call hard sci-fi more than anything else. They're doing a lot of experimental type of stories that they never did before, so it's definitely exciting.
Well, you mentioned that the Historian was sort of a newspaper years ago.
A newsletter, yeah.
A newsletter. Mm-hmm. And now it's after becoming a podcast.
That's right, Jim.
Who's involved? How did you go from a newspaper to a podcast?
Well,
or a newsletter, sorry.
You have to really look back into like the local history. Like as I said, when I joined, the newsletter was the creative expression of the group of people that were part of the Doctor Who club locally, and I submitted myself. I submitted a lot of work to it. I wrote a lot of articles for it, a lot of reviews. Eventually, it sort of went under, unfortunately, because the people who were involved in producing it, as I said before, sort of scattered throughout the world. And myself and a friend of mine by the name of Stephen Windsor, We wanted to resurrect it, and we tried at the time. It was prior to the new series bringing it back. We tried to resurrect it as a magazine, and we were mildly successful, I guess you could say. And I was the editor, I guess you could call me the last editor upon the actual magazine, the Historian, the actual newsletter. And then as years went on, technology developed to the point that I wanted to do something with Doctor Who. I wanted to do that creative expression again.
Yeah.
And I also am a member of what's called the Addictive Internet Radio Network, because podcasting sort of proved to be a very large component.
It is, yep.
And it allows anybody to have that expression. Anybody can download it, listen to it as a podcast on iTunes, whatever format you want to use. And I thought that this would be a wonderful opportunity for me to talk about Doctor Who as opposed to the prohibitive costs of creating a newsletter that you have to produce and print and send out, distribute. So a friend of mine by the name of Stephen Lake, we're both co-hosts of the Historian. I call it the Historian, as I said, because there was a Historian magazine for a great many years here.
So it's almost like the next generation of...
It's Historian, you're a Star Trek fan, that's why I'm saying
it's the next generation of the actual news, of the newsletter.
It is. It's I would consider it sort of, it's almost like in Doctor Who, the concept of regeneration, rebirth, renewal. Every couple of years there's a new Doctor, and this is very similar to that because it's a rebirth of the idea of being able to talk about Doctor Who and being able to express yourself creatively just in a different format, yeah.
What is addictive, what did you call it?
Addictive Internet Radio.
And what exactly is that?
Addictive Internet Radio is a loose amalgamation of local podcasts. All of the podcasts originated here in Newfoundland, primarily in the metro area, but there's some that are coming on board from outside of that. It began in earnest because myself and my friend Chris were doing a explicit, I guess you could say, podcast called Verbal Abuse.
I've heard of that one, yes.
We did verbal abuse. You have, yeah. We did verbal abuse for such a long period of time. It's been over 2 years now. We've gotten a lot of feedback from that, and a lot of people seem to like it and downloaded it. So we then discovered that there were other local podcasts around, and we began interacting with them. And we all got together and said it would be a good idea if we were all sort of under the same banner. So we could mutually promote each other, we could cross-promote, we could get similar sponsors, and we wanted to have a diversity as a network. We wanted to be able to say we have shows, for example, The Historian is about Doctor Who, we have Verbal Abuse, which is sort of like Howard Stern, I guess you could say, and we have one called Combat Arena, which is about mixed martial arts and wrestling. We're always bringing aboard new content.
Oh, that's neat. And that's just, it's all made here in Newfoundland?
It's made right here, yeah.
Excellent, excellent, excellent.
Your fan base that you have for your iPad or your internet, whatever it is, do you find it is our age group that grew up with Doctor Who, or do you find that the younger crowd are getting into, say, early teens, early 20s?
Well, for the purposes, it's a good question. For the purposes of what I do, the Historian, it seems to be from the feedback we have and from the listener base that we've ascertained we have, it seems to be mostly between like 18 to 35, like an older group. I think I have an influence on that because every time Steve, my co-host, talks about Matt Smith, I kind of beat him down verbally. So I'm always sort of promoting the idea of Doctor Who is not a new series. It's been on the go since 1963. The BBC, unfortunately, does sort of have a divide between old fans and new. Again, that translates into the fans of today aren't really aware this is not a new series. It's, it's been on the go forever. So I always try to bring that up. And I think that has an influence upon the age group of the people that we have listening to the show. I would like to hear from more people who are younger, and I like to hope that I'm entertaining as well as educating. That it's not a new series. And much as Battlestar Galactica wasn't a new series, it was it had a history.
Don't even talk about the new Battlestar. Don't even go.
I very much enjoy the new Battlestar.
Oh,
you're in the minority, my friend.
Oh, go on.
Well, I'm a newbie when it comes to Doctor Who because when I first started watching it. It was David Tennant.
David Tennant, yeah.
That was the Doctor Who. Now, a few of them, they done like a marathon, and they went back to another previous one.
Right.
And I'm not sure what his name was, but it was pretty good. But so I'm kind of a newbie when it comes to Doctor Who.
Well, I mean, the thing is with newbies, and I realized this because I did a panel at the last science fiction convention where I said this is sort of like the idiot's guide to Doctor Who, and everybody showed up. Everybody in the audience didn't know who I was talking about. They didn't know Tom Baker with a scarf, from the 1970s. They didn't know that the first Doctor was, 1963, and he was an old, aged actor. by the name of William Hartnell. They just didn't know that. They assumed that, as I say, Doctor Who began in 2005 and has been running ever since. And I do enjoy the fact that they allowed for, like, for example, Peter Davies in the Fifth Doctor, he came back for a special episode. And that's, new fans get a chance to see that, and get a chance to see current Doctors interacting with old Doctors. But it's difficult because educating these people on the history of the show can be troublesome sometimes, because it's a giant, universe of stuff out there.
Well, Shane, I'd like to thank you for dropping by
Sure,
today
no problem.
and talking about Doctor Who and your podcast and stuff.
Thank
That's
you.
all the time we have for today. And join us again next week for some more talk about sci-fi and anything else that pops up. And if you like to send any emails to us or comments, you can get us at our email address at the Sci-Fi Zone at gmail.com. We also have a Facebook that you can visit us there, the Sci-Fi Zone. And if you wish to just contact me, I'm not sure if anybody else here has Twitter, but you can get me on Twitter, KarenFord1. So thank you for watching.